Long before I actually became a journalist, I knew that I wanted to be. And so my father said, if you want to be a journalist, then better do things that journalists do. So he said, read the newspaper every day, which I did. Then he said, it wasn't enough that you were reading the newspaper. How would you know and others know that you've learned something from it? So he asked me to keep a diary. I kept a diary of two things, he said. A, important news that you must make a note of. B, words and expressions that you've encountered that you must use later on. And so these two kinds of notes I could keep every day. But my father also said that it isn't enough that you're doing all of these things. I want to see what you actually do as a journalist, even one who hasn't found a job yet. So he said, start writing on things that affect you. So things that affected me, my youth, the confusion that I had, things that were happening around me, the political environment, the social environment, and so forth. Movies, all sorts of things. He said, you choose the topics. He said, write one page, whether 2 paragraphs or 3 paragraphs. And that's what I would do. Sometimes I would cheat, make my paragraphs longer, but he understood and never said anything about it. And he read what I wrote, made minor notes, and asked me to make corrections, which I did. Eventually, he stopped reading what I was writing because he said, I know that you are. And that's where my journey began. I hadn't reached anywhere. Then I learned that the Press Trust of India was holding its national competition for training journalists, and the minimum requirement was graduation. I was a graduate by then. I wrote the exam and there were interviews and so forth, and finally I got into Press Trust of India. I became a journalist there in New Delhi on Parliament Street. Then my training began. Initially, you see, PTI follows the Reuters format, and initially you have to be a sub-editor before you can become a reporter. Because unless you know how copy needs to be edited, you will never be able to write copy that can really be truly edited well. So I learned all of that. But that was all before the hi-fi computers began. We did have some computers. We knew what computers were, but our work was mainly on typewriters, on pen and paper, and teleprinters. Those things have vanished. 10 years later, I was really smitten by television. So I wanted to be a television reporter. And Doordarshan was holding its national competition for recruiting television journalists. I wrote that through a series of interviews, etc., etc. I finally got in. Lakhs of people must have applied. I'm told I felt pretty good about it. Then I became a TV reporter. I was covering all sorts of incidents, events, visits. I was covering important people of all kinds, Indians, leaders, politicians, leading officials, major, minor press conferences, this, that, and the other, visiting all sorts of places. I did that for a good 10 years. And for some time, of course, I was then serving abroad. I lived in the United States for a few years, and I was working with a digital content creation company. I was heading it. I came back, and then I joined some leading news organizations, notably India TV and then News 24. By the time it was 2011, I decided I had to write my story. There was a story in my head, and I had to turn it into a novel. It was eating into me. And I left everything, wrote my first novel, published it, and in the process of publishing it, I realized that it was difficult to be a published author. And if I faced such difficulty writing and publishing my novel, after having been a journalist for 27 long years, what about children who can't step out of school? So after publishing it, I decided that I'd set up a publishing organization that did two things. Most uniquely, A, it would not take ready-made manuscripts. It would identify talented writers, work with them, mentor them, handhold them, finish the manuscripts, edit, proofread, complete the books, and then publish these books. So I set up what is called Quill Club Writers. We are a publishing organization that identifies, mentors, and publishes young writers. We have so far published more than 100 books, and we are working with nearly 100 schools nationwide. Almost 250,000 children are reading these books as part of their curriculum. And the work is ongoing at the moment. We have a lot of work to do, but we cover almost all geographies of India, from the north to the south, the east to the west, and of course, a lot in the middle of the country. This is what I do. I've just finished my second novel and I'm about to place it on the market, perhaps April or May. And then I'm on to my third and perhaps a few more.